The world knows Alexander, Alex Thorne, as the ruthless billionaire who coldly honored his dying mother's wish by marrying the elegant but humble Layla Khan, only to discard her 6 months later with the venomous declaration, "You were a contract, not a love." The public watched as Layla quietly signed the divorce papers, never uttering a word of complaint, leading everyone, including Alex, to believe she had faded into obscurity, heartbroken and, as he would later cruelly assert, barren. But what if the silence wasn't defeat, but strategy? What if the final duty-bound night they shared gifted Layla a secret so profound she chose to carry the heavy truth alone for 2 years? The ultimate curiosity lies in what power she has hidden, and how a man who built an empire on calculated cruelty will react when Christmas night forces him to his knees, utterly exposed, facing three tiny silent witnesses who bear his unmistakable mark. The question isn't whether Alex will regret his malice, but how completely his world will shatter when he realizes the family he dismissed is the only inheritance that truly matters. Hello again, everyone. I'm James, and we are now moving past the brutal foundation of Alexander and Layla's story. The contract is broken, but Layla has a devastating secret Alex doesn't see coming. If you are loving this suspenseful drama, please take a second right now to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. You won't want to miss the shocking twists we have lined up. Ready? Let's dive back into the fractured world of the Thorn Empire and Layla's silent new life. The wedding hall glittered like a promise that had already been broken. Crystal chandeliers spilled light over ivory drapes, gold-rimmed tables, and guests dressed in wealth and expectation. Every detail had been planned to perfection, every detail except love. Layla Khan stood at the center of it all, wrapped in silk and tradition, her hands trembling slightly beneath layers of delicate embroidery. She looked like a bride from a dream, but inside her heart beat with quiet uncertainty. Alexander Thorne stood beside her, tall and immaculate, his presence commanding without effort. The ruthless billionaire, the heir to an empire, the man every woman in the room secretly envied her for marrying. Yet his hand barely touched hers. There was space between them, measured, intentional, cold. This marriage was not born of desire. It was drafted like a contract. Alex's mother, weakened by illness and haunted by her mortality, had wanted one thing before she died: to see her son married, to see him settled, to believe he would not end up alone. And Alex, who had conquered boardrooms and destroyed competitors without blinking, had agreed out of duty, not devotion. Layla knew this. She had known it from the moment his eyes first met hers, not with warmth, not with curiosity, but with calculation. Still, she had hoped. Hope was a dangerous thing. The vows were exchanged, words heavy with tradition but hollow in meaning. When Alex slid the ring onto her finger, his touch was firm but distant, as if he were sealing a deal, not promising a life. The applause thundered. Cameras flashed. Smiles bloomed across faces that did not know the truth. Layla smiled too. She smiled because she believed kindness could soften stone. She smiled because she believed time could turn obligation into affection. She smiled because she believed she could earn a place in his heart. That night, in the massive Thorne estate, the illusion finally shattered. Their bedroom was vast, elegant, and painfully silent. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Fresh roses sat untouched. The air smelled of luxury and unfamiliarity. Alex loosened his tie, his movements precise, controlled. He did not look at her as a husband looks at a bride. He looked at her as a man finishing a task. "You should understand something clearly," he said, his voice calm but unyielding. Layla turned to him, her hands clasped together. "Alex, this marriage exists because my mother asked for it," he continued, cutting her off. "Not because I wanted it." The words landed like a quiet slap. She swallowed. I know it wasn't your choice, but we can still— No, he said flatly. He finally looked at her then, and there was no cruelty in his eyes. Worse, there was nothing at all. You are an obligation, he said, not an attachment. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush her chest. I will fulfill my duty, he added, his tone clinical. But don't mistake that for affection. You are not my wife in the way you might be imagining. Layla nodded slowly, her throat burning, her pride holding her upright when her heart wanted to collapse. I understand, she whispered, but she didn't. Not fully, because understanding didn't make it hurt less. They shared the bed that night in the most distant way two people could. There was no tenderness, no whispered words, no warmth, just two bodies occupying the same space, divided by an invisible wall. Over the next few months, the pattern continued. 2 nights, sometimes 3. That was all. Alex would appear, composed and unreadable, stay the night in silence, then vanish again. Back to his separate wing of the mansion, back to his life, his work, his world. He never asked how she was, never noticed the books she read, the charities she supported, the meals she waited to share. Layla learned to eat alone. She learned to walk through the halls without expectation. She learned the sound of his footsteps and how rarely they came near her door. The staff noticed. They noticed how the mistress of the house was treated like a guest, how the master never stayed long enough to leave warmth behind. Whispers traveled through corridors, soft but sharp. Still, Layla remained kind. She greeted everyone with grace. She fulfilled every role expected of her. She never complained, never begged, never asked for what she was not given. But at night, alone, she cried quietly into her pillow. One afternoon, passing through the library, she heard his voice. She hadn't meant to listen. She hadn't even known he was there. Alex was speaking to a friend, casual, unguarded, unaware. She's a lovely person, I suppose, he said, almost absently. But I'll never love her. Layla stopped breathing. This marriage is temporary, he continued. Once my mother is gone, so is this arrangement. The words sank deep, carving something raw inside her. She stepped back silently, her heart shattering with a quiet dignity that no one witnessed. That was the moment Layla understood the truth. She was not a partner. She was not a dream. She was time-bound. And Alex Thorne, for all his power, had already decided she was disposable. She returned to her room, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at her hands, the ring heavy on her finger, the promise meaningless. Outside, the mansion stood tall and proud. Inside, a woman realized she was utterly alone. Layla did not know it yet, but the cold nights, the rare shared moments, and the distance Alex kept would leave behind something neither of them had planned. Something that would one day turn his certainty into regret. After that night, something inside Layla settled into stillness. Not peace, something harder. She stopped waiting for footsteps that never came, stopped wondering if today would be different. The hope that once fluttered quietly in her chest folded in on itself and disappeared. What remained was clarity, and clarity, she learned, could be crueler than disappointment. Alex became more distant than ever. Days passed without a word, then weeks. He no longer pretended to share space, no polite nods in the hallway, no accidental encounters at dinner. It was as if she had become part of the mansion's architecture, present, functional, unseen. Layla adjusted. She poured herself into routine. Morning walks through the garden, letters to her mother, quiet charity planning from her desk. She learned how to exist without being acknowledged and how to keep her dignity intact while doing so. Then, one afternoon, a message arrived. Mr. Thorne would like to see you in his study. Her heart didn't race. That scared her more than anything. The study smelled of leather, wood polish, and finality. Alex stood near the window, sunlight outlining his shoulders like a man carved from authority. He didn't invite her to sit. A thin folder lay on the desk between them. "Let's be direct," he said. He slid the folder toward her. Divorce papers. No hesitation. No apology. No softening of words. "This marriage has served its purpose," he continued. "I won't live a life that isn't mine." Layla stared at the documents, her fingers resting on the edge but not touching. The words blurred slightly, not from tears, but from something heavier. Shock, restrained by pride. "You deserve clarity," Alex added, as if granting her a favor. "You are not my love, not my choice." He paused, watching her carefully. "I'm taking back my life." There it was, clean, surgical, irrevocable. Layla lifted her gaze to him, searching briefly for doubt, regret, conflict. She found none. His face was calm, resolved, already detached from the consequences of his decision. "Is there anything else?" she asked quietly. He blinked, caught off guard by her composure. "No," he said. "The settlement is generous. You'll want for nothing." She almost smiled at that. Money. Always money. As if comfort could replace belonging. Layla picked up the pen. Her hand didn't shake. She signed her name with steady precision, every letter an act of self-respect. When she slid the folder back toward him, it felt like returning a borrowed life. "I wish you well, Alex," she said. He nodded once as if closing a meeting. That was all. No goodbye, no acknowledgement of what they never had. She left the study with her spine straight and her heart in fragments no one could see. Packing took longer than she expected, not because she had much to take, but because every item reminded her of how little of herself had ever truly belonged there. Clothes untouched by shared memories, books never discussed, jewelry worn only for appearances. She paused at the doorway of the bedroom for the last time. The bed was perfectly made, untouched. She closed the door gently. As Layla walked down the steps with her suitcase, she felt it, a sudden wave of dizziness, sharp and unexpected. She steadied herself against the banister, breathing slowly until it passed. She told herself it was exhaustion. Outside, the driver waited. She did not look back. From the balcony above, Alex watched her leave. For a fleeting second, something uncomfortable stirred in his chest, a heaviness he couldn't name. He dismissed it immediately, tightening his jaw. "Good riddance," he muttered, turning away. Layla's new apartment was small, quiet, and unfamiliar, but it was hers. The silence there was different. Lonely, yes, but honest. No echo of rejection, no constant reminder of being unwanted, just space to breathe. That night, the dizziness returned, then nausea, then a strange, unbearable fatigue. Concern crept in slowly, reluctantly. A few days later, Layla sat alone in a sterile clinic room, hands folded tightly in her lap. The doctor spoke gently, reviewing results, his tone shifting into something careful. "Mrs. Khan," he said, looking at her with measured. When Skylar asked why Layla's name was on the guest list, Alex didn't hesitate. "I need her to see what she missed out on," he said flatly. "I need her to understand her place." Skylar smiled, satisfied, unaware of the storm she was smiling into. Alex leaned back in his chair, conviction settling comfortably around him. He felt powerful again, certain. The past would come to him on his terms, and this time he would make sure it stayed buried. As the Christmas gala invitations were sealed and sent, Alex had no idea that the woman he intended to humiliate had been living a truth powerful enough to dismantle everything he believed he controlled. The invitation arrived in an envelope heavier than it needed to be, thick cream paper, embossed lettering, gold edges meant to signal importance. Layla recognized the style instantly. Alexander Thorne never did anything without reminding people who held power. She held the envelope for a long moment before opening it. Not because she was afraid, because she was calm. 2 years earlier, her hands might have trembled. Her heart might have raced with questions. Now she felt only a steady awareness, like standing before a closed door she had already learned how to unlock. The words were formal, polished, impersonal. "You are cordially invited." Alex's name sat at the bottom like a signature carved in stone. A Christmas gala. Layla read it once. Then again. Not a reconciliation. Not an apology. A stage. She folded the invitation carefully and placed it on the table. Behind her, soft laughter filled the small living room. 3 little voices tangled together in delight, chasing one another across the rug. Toys lay scattered. A half-built tower leaned dangerously to one side. "Ami, look!" Asher called out proudly. Layla turned, smiling as he raised his arms in triumph. Reese clapped wildly, already knocking the tower over. Finn laughed, unconcerned, collapsing into giggles on the floor. Life had filled the spaces Alex never bothered to see. Later that night, after the boys were asleep, Layla sat alone at the kitchen table. The invitation lay open beside her. She traced the edge with her finger, thoughtful. She knew exactly why Alex had sent it. She knew the tone he intended. The unspoken message hidden between the lines. "Come and see what you lost." She exhaled slowly. What he didn't know was that she had nothing left to lose. Her phone rang just as she reached for the kettle. Alex's name lit up the screen. For a second, the past flickered. Nights of silence, words that cut clean and deep. Then it passed. She answered. "Yes?" His voice was the same. Calm, controlled, slightly condescending. "There's a minor legal issue from the divorce," he said. "Nothing serious." She waited. "I thought it best to handle it personally," he continued. "Efficiency." "Of course," she replied evenly. There was a pause, not awkward, measured. Then he spoke again, and the cruelty slipped in, casual and deliberate. "I assume you've built a life of your own," he said. "Some people move on better than others." Layla said nothing. "I suppose not everyone is meant for family," he added. "Some things just don't happen." The words were carefully chosen. She felt the sting, but it didn't pierce her. "That's an interesting observation," she said calmly. He seemed surprised by her tone. "I hope the invitation didn't cause discomfort," he said, though his voice suggested the opposite. "Not at all," she replied. Another pause. Then, with quiet certainty, she said, "I'd be delighted to attend, Alex. I wouldn't miss a family gathering for the world." Silence followed. Alex ended the call shortly after, unsettled by something he couldn't quite name. Layla set the phone down gently. She stood, walked to the hallway, and peeked into the bedroom where her son slept. 3 small forms curled peacefully beneath blankets. 3 steady breaths. 3 lives built from strength, not permission. She knew the night ahead would not be easy, but she also knew she was ready. The days leading up to Christmas passed with quiet intention. Layla prepared carefully, not with revenge in mind, but with truth. She chose her dress thoughtfully. Elegant, understated, nothing loud, nothing desperate. A woman who had nothing to prove. The boys' outfits were laid out beside hers, tiny jackets pressed neatly, shoes polished. They laughed as she helped them try everything on, unaware of the weight the evening carried. To them, it was just a party. To her, it was closure. On Christmas Eve, Layla stood before the mirror, adjusting an earring. She studied her reflection, not searching for beauty, but for steadiness. She found it. The woman looking back at her was not the bride who once waited for affection. She was a mother, a survivor, a truth-bearer. And tomorrow night, Alex Thorne would finally be forced to look at what he had so casually dismissed. As Layla closed the door, behind her and prepared for Christmas night, she carried with her a secret powerful enough to turn a glittering gala into a moment, no one present would ever forget. Christmas night arrived dressed in gold. The Thorne estate blazed against the winter dark, every window glowing, every archway wrapped in light. Cars lined the long drive, their headlights sweeping across polished stone like spotlights announcing importance. Laughter spilled into the cold air. Music drifted outward, rich and confident. Inside, the ballroom breathed wealth. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across marble floors. Servers moved with trained precision. Guests clustered in elegant circles, voices low, eyes sharp, measuring status with every glance. This was Alex Thorne's world, controlled, admired, unquestioned. At the center of it all, Alex stood beside Skylar. She looked radiant, her arm looped possessively through his. Cameras flashed, compliments flowed. Alex accepted it all with the ease of a man used to being watched. Tonight was meant to reinforce everything: his success, his choices, his dominance over the past. He had not looked toward the entrance once. He didn't need to. The doors opened. Conversation faltered, not suddenly, but unevenly, like music losing rhythm. Heads turned. He felt it before he saw it. A shift in the room. Alex glanced up. Layla stood framed by light, composed and still, as if the room had been waiting for her arrival without knowing it. She wore elegance without effort, confidence without arrogance. Her posture was calm, her expression unreadable. She did not hesitate. She stepped forward. And then, movement beside her. 3 small figures followed, dressed in perfect symmetry. Tiny coats, polished shoes, curious eyes scanning the unfamiliar space. The room stilled completely. Not a whisper, not a breath. Alex's mind stalled, unable to process what his eyes were taking in. The boys moved closer to Layla instinctively, their small hands brushing against her dress. They looked around with innocent wonder, unaware of the weight settling over the crowd. Skylar leaned in, her smile faltering. "Who are those children?" she whispered. Alex didn't answer. He couldn't. The boys' faces caught the light as they looked up at the chandeliers, mesmerized. One tugged gently at Layla's hand, another shifted closer, steadying himself. The third stared openly at the room, unafraid. Alex's chest tightened. The resemblance hit him like a blow he didn't see coming. Same bone structure, same unmistakable intensity in the eyes, same quiet confidence in the way they stood, as if the room belonged to them too. Guests stared openly now. Whispers rippled, soft but electric. Skylar's grip tightened on Alex's arm. "Alex," she murmured, her voice strained. He didn't hear her. His focus locked onto Layla. She met his gaze without flinching. No anger, no apology, no fear, just certainty. Alex felt the ground shift beneath him. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He had imagined her arriving alone, smaller, quieter. He had imagined victory. Instead, she had walked in carrying something powerful enough to steal the air from his lungs. Servers froze mid-step. Music died softly in the background. The room existed in a suspended moment no one dared disturb. One of the boys laughed suddenly, the sound clear and bright. It echoed. Alex's heartbeat thundered in his ears. Skylar pulled away from him, confusion etched across her face. "You said," she began, then stopped, her voice dissolving into silence. Layla took another step forward. The boys followed. Every movement felt deliberate, unstoppable. Alex realized he was staring. He forced himself to breathe. Guests parted instinctively, creating a path without being asked. Layla walked through it with her chin lifted, her children close, her presence undeniable. She stopped a few steps away from Alex. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Alex swallowed, his voice rough as he broke the silence. "Layla," he said, disbelief threaded tightly through the sound of her name. She inclined her head slightly. "Merry Christmas, Alex." The words landed softly and detonated something deep inside him. As Alex stared at the three boys standing beside Layla, mirrors of something he refused to name, he realized too late that Christmas night had already slipped beyond his control. For several seconds after Layla spoke his name, Alex could not move. The ballroom had not resumed breathing. If anything, the silence thickened, turning heavy, expectant. Every pair of eyes remained fixed on the space between them, as though something invisible was being pulled tight. Alex became painfully aware of himself, of the heat beneath his collar, of Skylar no longer touching him, of the three children standing there, so close he could see the rise and fall of their chests. He cleared his throat. "This isn't appropriate," he said too quickly, his voice sharper than intended. "We should talk privately." Layla nodded once as if she had anticipated the request. She rested a hand on one small shoulder. "Stay here," she murmured softly. The boys obeyed instantly. That, more than anything, unsettled Alex. They followed her without hesitation, trusted her completely, as if the world made sense because she stood between them and it. Alex turned and strode toward a side corridor, not waiting to see if she followed. She did. The moment they were out of sight, the murmurs began behind them, low, relentless, alive. "What is this?" Alex demanded the instant they were alone. "What are you doing?" Layla didn't answer right away. She looked at him carefully, taking in the rigid posture, the controlled fury barely contained beneath his calm exterior. She saw the man who had dismissed her without hesitation, and the man now struggling to control panic. "You invited me," she said evenly. "That wasn't an invitation for this," he snapped. "You had no right." "No right," she echoed softly. The word hung between them. Alex ran a hand through his hair, pacing once, then stopping abruptly. "Who are those children?" Layla met his gaze without blinking. "They are everything you cast aside, Alex." His chest tightened. "What does that mean?" he demanded. She stepped closer, not confrontational, not defensive, honest. "They are your sons," she said quietly. "Triplets." The word landed with a dull finality. Alex stared at her, uncomprehending. "No," he said immediately. "That's not possible." She didn't flinch. "You left," she replied, "and life continued." His breath grew shallow. "You expect me to believe this, after 2 years of silence?" "I expect nothing from you," she said calmly. "I'm telling you the truth." He laughed, short, disbelieving. "This is absurd." His eyes flicked past her, toward the ballroom, where the sound of whispers filtered through the walls. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I do," she answered. "Do you?" He shook his head, backing away as if distance might restore control. "You should have told me." "And been dismissed again?" she asked quietly. That stopped him. He looked at her sharply. "You walked away," he said. "You signed the papers. You disappeared." "I protected my children," she said. "And myself." Alex opened his mouth to argue, and froze. Something tugged at his memory. He saw Asher again in his mind, the way the boy had tilted his head, the faint crescent-shaped scar just above the eyebrow. His heartbeat stuttered. He lifted his gaze slowly. "One of them has a scar." Layla nodded. "Above his eyebrow." His throat went dry. "I got that scar when I was 7, he said hoarsely. "I know," she replied. The air shifted. Alex pressed his palm against the wall, steadying himself. "You planned this," he accused weakly. "No," she said. "I endured it." He straightened suddenly, anger flooding back like a shield. "This is a lie," he said loudly. "A convenient story. You think I'll just accept this, that I'll humiliate myself?" Layla's eyes hardened, not with rage, but with resolve. "You humiliated me without hesitation," she said. "This is simply the truth, standing in front of you." The door behind them creaked softly. A sliver of the ballroom came into view. Alex became acutely aware of the audience waiting beyond the walls. He clenched his jaw. "I won't let you ruin me," he said coldly. Layla held his gaze. "I didn't come to ruin you." "Then why bring them here?" She inhaled slowly. "Because you wanted to see what you lost." Silence fell again. Alex had no answer. As Alex stood there, caught between denial and recognition, he didn't yet realize that his next words would determine whether the room beyond those doors would witness reconciliation or total destruction. The ballroom felt heavier than it had seconds before, as if the very air had thickened under the weight of anticipation. Alex's words still echoed faintly, sharp and deliberate, slicing through the crowd of elegantly dressed guests. He had stepped forward with the confidence of a man certain of his dominance, but now, standing before Layla and her children, the authority he wielded so easily felt suddenly brittle. The three boys clung subtly to their mother, sensing tension without fully understanding it, their wide eyes scanning the sea of onlookers with innocent curiosity. Layla's presence was calm, poised, but beneath it lay an unshakable strength. Every inch of her posture radiated control and quiet defiance. She stood as a barrier, shielding her sons from the storm that had erupted around them. Alex's face hardened as he watched, a mixture of disbelief and outrage simmering in his chest. His carefully curated world of power, appearances, and control was being challenged in the most unexpected way by the woman he had dismissed and the children he had denied. "This is enough," he said, his voice louder now, forced into the room like a weapon. He deliberately drew the attention of every guest, ensuring all eyes were trained on the unfolding confrontation. Murmurs arose immediately, subtle, cautious at first, then spreading like wildfire through the assembly. Cameras flashed, capturing moments that no one yet understood, but everyone sensed were monumental. Skylar, standing close to him, pressed herself against his arm, her earlier excitement gone, replaced by confusion and worry. "I won't allow my event to be hijacked by theatrics and lies," Alex announced, the authority in his tone teetering on desperation. He turned his gaze deliberately toward the crowd, emphasizing every syllable, every accusation, hoping the audience would validate his version of the story. Guests exchanged glances, uncertain whether to intervene or remain spectators of the unfolding drama. Layla remained silent, letting him speak. She observed his aggression, noting the deliberate way he attempted to dominate the room. It was predictable, almost formulaic. A man used to bending the world to his will, failing now in a way he had never anticipated. Yet she did not flinch. Her composure was deliberate, a shield around the fragile sense of peace she had cultivated over the last 2 years. Her sons were her priority. Everything else, the whispers, the accusations, the false pride, was secondary. Alex's eyes narrowed. He took a step closer to her, voice rising with a controlled fury. "You are a liar," he shouted, "a gold digger. These children are not mine." His words cut through the room, heavy and sharp, like stones thrown in a pond. The ripples of shock spread through the crowd, making every guest lean forward, hearts pounding in anticipation of the response. His words were calculated to wound, intended to disarm, but they only highlighted his panic. Skylar looked at him, confusion and fear intertwining in her expression. "Alex, this isn't... What's happening?" she murmured, but he barely heard her, consumed by the need to assert control. Layla stepped forward, immediately positioning herself between him and the boys. Reese, startled by the sharpness of Alex's voice, began to tremble. His lower lip quivered, eyes wide with fear. Instinctively, Layla crouched, wrapping him into her arms. She drew Asher and Finn close, her hands firm and protective, her gaze never leaving Alex's. She was a mother defending her children, her authority absolute, her presence unyielding. Every inch of her being communicated that no man could intimidate what she had built or the lives she now protected. "You will not speak to them that way," Layla said, her voice low but resonant, carrying a calm that belied the storm around her. The room quieted even further. Conversations ceased entirely. Guests leaned in subtly, sensing the power shift, the subtle but undeniable force of a woman who had endured cruelty and emerged stronger. Alex's chest tightened. For the first time, he realized that his words were powerless to harm her or her children, that the moral ground had shifted irreversibly beneath his feet. "You planned this, didn't you?" he demanded, trying to regain the narrative, his eyes blazing with accusation. "You orchestrated this spectacle to humiliate me, to prove some point." He took a deliberate step closer, attempting to dominate her physical space, as he had so many times in boardrooms, in meetings, in the halls of power. Layla remained still. Her voice was steady, unwavering. "I did not plan this for you," she said quietly. "I endured. I survived. I lived. I protected my children. That is all." Her calm contrast to his fury unsettled him further. He had expected tears, hesitation, weakness. He had not expected this quiet, unassailable strength. It was a presence that commanded attention, that drew the eyes of the room toward her, leaving him exposed, vulnerable, and painfully human. Skylar took a step forward, her voice shaky, attempting to intervene. "Alex, please," she began, but he waved her off, unwilling to admit even a sliver of uncertainty in front of the audience. He had to control this narrative publicly. He could not let a single guest doubt him, could not allow anyone to sense the fracture forming in his image of untouchable authority. "She is manipulating the situation," he declared, his voice cracking despite the effort to remain dominant. "Those children are not mine, and I will not be shamed by her theatrics." The word theatrics rang hollow, revealing the panic beneath his carefully maintained composure. Layla rose fully to her height, keeping one arm wrapped protectively around Reese, while her other hand rested gently on Asher's shoulder, Finn close by her side. "You humiliated me for 2 years," she said, her voice quiet but cutting. "You dismissed me, abandoned me, told the world I was nothing, and now you shout because the truth is visible. You wanted me small, silent, invisible, and yet here I am." The room held its breath. Every guest could feel the tension vibrating in the air, the clash of pride and truth, the reckoning unfolding in real time. Alex's face flushed crimson, his breath came faster. Every accusation he had rehearsed, every insult he had weaponized, fell flat against the weight of her words. He tried again. "I will not. I cannot." But his voice faltered. For once, power did not follow him. Authority did not shield him. His empire of control, meticulously built, seemed fragile, exposed, meaningless in the face of what he had refused to acknowledge. Reese whimpered again. The sound, small and frightened, pierced him more than any rebuke or argument could. Layla's instinct kicked in fully. She leaned down, gathering all three boys into her arms, forming an unbroken circle of protection. "Do you hear them?" she said softly, her eyes locking onto his. "Hear them. They are safe because I made them so. They are here because I chose life, not because you did. And you will not take that from them, nor from me." The room had grown eerily silent. Guests shifted uneasily, whispers replaced by tense observation. Skylar's hand trembled as she gripped Alex's arm, no longer certain who held the power. Alex opened his mouth to speak again, but the words stumbled, meaningless under the force of Layla's calm authority. He wanted control. He needed control. But the truth she carried, the lives she protected, the children she defended, rendered all his strategies futile. He stared at the boys, at Asher, Reese, and Finn, at the reflections of himself he had never acknowledged, at the consequence of his arrogance and neglect. And for the first time in years, Alex felt the uncomfortable stirrings of fear, not for himself, but for the world that could now see the consequences of his cruelty. The crowd felt it too. Silence stretched long, uncomfortable, filled with the tension of a story paused at its critical moment. Layla held her children firmly, unyielding, resolute. Alex's rage was now mixed with confusion, panic, and disbelief. He could attack verbally, attempt to shame, but the room sensed the imbalance. Authority had left him. Truth and maternal instinct had seized the stage. Alex's chest heaved, pride battered, ego fraying, as he realized for the first time that shouting, accusing, and belittling would not reclaim the narrative. Layla's next words, calm but piercing, promised to strip away the facade entirely, leaving him exposed before everyone he had ever hoped to impress. Layla straightened in the center of the ballroom, her small army of sons clinging to her like shields. And finally, she spoke. Her voice was quiet at first, almost conversational, but beneath it, the weight of 2 years of injustice, humiliation, and silence pulsed through every word. "You called me Barren, Alex," she said, eyes locking onto him, steady, unblinking. The crowd leaned forward instinctively, sensing that these were words heavy with consequence, words that would not be ignored. Alex froze, a blush creeping across his cheeks, mingling with the flush of rage. He opened his mouth, ready to defend, ready to deny, ready to strike back with the arrogance that had always shielded him. But she didn't stop. Her next words rolled over him like a wave, eroding the foundation of his carefully constructed pride. "But tonight," she continued, "I have proven you wrong. I have lived, I have loved, and I have given life where you only left emptiness." The guests murmured softly among themselves, the first whispers threading through the ballroom like wind through trees. Cameras flashed, capturing the image of this woman, once dismissed, once silenced, standing at the center of his empire, unafraid, unwavering, commanding attention not by wealth or power, but by truth. Skylar's hand tightened around her own dress, disbelief and fear mixing in her pale face. She had known Alex as a man in control of every situation, but control, she realized now, had slipped through his fingers entirely. Layla took a slow, deliberate breath, letting her words hang in the air. "Do you remember, Alex, how you told me I was nothing? That I was an obligation? That my worth was measured by my inability to give you the life you wanted?" Her tone was calm, almost clinical, but every syllable cut like a scalpel. "Those words," she said, gesturing lightly to the 3 boys at her side, "belong to the past that you abandoned, the past that cannot touch what I have built." Alex's fists clenched at his sides, his mouth moved, but no words came. He wanted to roar, to shout, to reassert dominance, to remind everyone of who he was. But the sight of the children, the precision in her gaze, the certainty in her posture, all of it left him speechless. For once he was stripped of power, and worse, stripped of denial. His silence drew the eyes of the entire room. Every guest who had ever admired his confidence now felt the tension, the precariousness of his facade. She stepped closer to him, slowly, carefully, ensuring that every movement emphasized her control, her victory in presence alone. "Alex," she said, her voice softening just slightly, carrying a quiet authority, "I have already filed for a DNA test." The words were simple, factual, unarguable. They landed in the room with the weight of inevitability. A collective intake of breath swept through the guests. The murmurs grew louder. Cameras focused. Some faces in the crowd were frozen with anticipation, others leaning forward, unable to look away from the drama unfolding before them. The billionaire, usually unshakable, staggered internally. He forced his jaw to set. You can't." His voice faltered. Every syllable was coated with fear, uncertainty, and the bitter taste of disbelief. He had controlled boardrooms, negotiations, entire companies with that same voice. Yet here, it failed him. It trembled against the certainty of the truth, against the power she now wielded in silence and in presence. Layla held up one hand, stopping him mid-protest. "No, Alex. I'm not here to debate. I am here to show you what you refuse to see, to feel what you denied me and these children." Her gaze shifted to her sons, bending ever so slightly to meet Asher's eyes. "They are mine," she said simply. "They are everything you cast aside when you chose yourself over love, over family, over life." Skylar's expression was pale, the shimmer of confidence replaced with terror. She realized that her presence, her role in this event, was now secondary. The narrative had shifted entirely. All attention gravitated to the woman Alex had dismissed, the three children he had never acknowledged, and the undeniable weight of the truth that now pressed upon him from every angle. The room seemed to contract around them, the chandelier's light reflecting in the eyes of every guest who sensed history being rewritten before them. Alex's hands shook slightly. He clenched them, trying to force strength, trying to reclaim some measure of authority. But nothing could reverse what was unfolding. For 2 years he had built a life of arrogance, of control, of appearances, and all of it now seemed hollow. Every insult he had thrown at her, every cold word, every declaration of her inadequacy, echoed in the silence that now demanded accountability. Layla stepped even closer, her voice steady, deliberate, each word a strike of truth against his walls of denial. "You said I was barren, that my heart was empty, that my existence meant nothing. Yet here they are," she said, sweeping a gentle gesture toward the children. "3 lives, healthy, strong, vibrant, and yes, they are yours. Every heartbeat, every smile, every breath, a living testament to what you willfully ignored." Alex's eyes flicked to the boys, and for a moment his arrogance faltered entirely. Each of them bore a resemblance impossible to deny, the set of their jaw, the slope of their shoulders, the intensity in their eyes. Memories he had buried stirred uncomfortably, the way the smallest crescent-shaped scar on Asher's forehead mirrored his own, the shape of Reese's chin, the set of Finn's hands. It was impossible, and yet undeniable. He wanted to deny it. He wanted to deflect, to shout, to reclaim his power, but the room sensed the collapse. Whispers rose again, this time questioning him. His employees, his peers, the high society elites, all were watching the unraveling with wide eyes. Alex realized the facade of control he had maintained for so long could not survive here. Not with the truth, not with her, not with the undeniable proof before them. Layla's words cut through the remaining defenses. "I do not seek vengeance," she said, her voice steady. "I do not seek to destroy you. But tonight I claim what is mine. I claim my children. I claim the dignity you tried to strip away. And I claim the truth." She bent slightly to lift Reese from the floor, drawing Asher and Finn closer. Her body shielded them, and in that moment, Alex saw the invincibility of maternal instinct, a force stronger than wealth, more enduring than pride, and infinitely more powerful than his own arrogance. He felt his world narrowing, the enormity of his neglect and cruelty pressing on him. Skylar's gaze wavered as she realized that she had been standing next to a man who was finally confronting the consequences of his actions in public. His empire of image, reputation, and pride seemed irrelevant now. Only the truth remained. Layla straightened, her hands firmly holding her children, and her eyes bore into his. "You wanted me to see what you considered my failures, Alex. You wanted me small, quiet, defeated. But life doesn't ask permission from cruelty. Life doesn't wait for arrogance. And life gave me these 3. Her words were simple, unflinching, undeniable. The room felt charged, the energy impossible to ignore. Alex stood frozen, the enormity of his past decisions, of his blindness, of his cruelty, crashing into him with every second that passed. The crowd remained silent, absorbed in the gravity of what had unfolded. It was more than a confrontation. It was a reckoning. Alex's heart pounded, his mind racing. He wanted to speak, to defend himself, to regain control, but every option felt empty, ineffective, meaningless. He realized for the first time that the narrative had shifted entirely. He was no longer in control. Layla finally stepped back slightly, giving space around her, her children's hands still tightly in hers. The message was clear. The stage belonged to her now, and no amount of denial or shouting could reclaim it. The truth had been revealed, and the world was watching. Alex's hands trembled slightly as he looked at the three children, then at Layla, and finally at the crowd. Pride, denial, and disbelief warred inside him. He knew the next words he spoke, if they came at all, would either save what little dignity remained or shatter it completely. And in that suspended moment he realized that the reckoning he had ignored for 2 years had only just begun. The envelope arrived on a Thursday morning, stark white and innocuous among the usual stack of mail. It carried no flourish, no warning, no indication of the chaos within. Yet Alex stared at it for a long moment, his hand hovering above it. He could feel the weight of it. Not just the paper, but the world it carried inside. 2 years of denial, 2 years of ignorance, of arrogance, of cruelty had been compressed into a single sheet. He could almost feel the eyes of the ballroom still on him, still judging, still accusing. He tore it open with deliberate caution, trying to prepare himself for whatever it contained. But preparation was useless. The moment his eyes scanned the words, the world he had built, the walls of arrogance he had erected, began to crumble from within. 99.99% probability of paternity. 3 lives tied irrevocably to him, his blood running through every vein, his legacy forever intertwined with the children he had ignored, dismissed, and denied. The numbers hit him like a physical blow. His chest tightened, his fingers trembled. His vision blurred slightly, not from the cold, not from fatigue, but from the realization of what he had done, what he had allowed, and what he had thrown away. 2 years of absence, 2 years of ignorance, 2 years of arrogance now stared back at him in undeniable proof. He sank into the nearest chair, crumpling slightly against the polished leather. The office was quiet, oppressively quiet. No staff, no assistants, no prying eyes. Only him, the envelope, and the crushing weight of consequence. He ran a hand down his face, pressed the heels of his palms to his eyes, trying to shut out the reality, trying to push back the unbearable truth. But it would not be ignored. The DNA test didn't lie. The world didn't need to confirm it for him. He knew. Images flashed in his mind, the first time he had seen Layla, her calm, unwavering gaze as she stood silently while he dismissed her. The day she signed the divorce papers without complaint, hiding her pain behind composed dignity. The quiet mornings, the laughter of 3 small boys he never acknowledged, the milestones he had missed, the first steps, the first words, the first heartbreaks he was never there to comfort. Every moment he had forsaken was now brutally tangible. Alex leaned back, breathing unevenly. He gripped the envelope tightly, tearing at the paper almost reflexively, though it had already revealed everything. The thought of her, Layla, protecting his children, raising them without him, without his presence, struck a chord deeper than anger, deeper than shame. Guilt, raw and sharp, surged violently. He remembered the wedding night, cold, detached, and cruelly indifferent. He remembered the words he had thrown at her, the sharpness in his tone when he declared she was an obligation. He remembered the finality in his voice when he walked away, convinced he had made the right choice, that freedom was worth more than responsibility. And now, confronted with proof, with undeniable reality, he realized how empty his life had been without acknowledging what truly mattered. Alex's knees shook. He leaned forward, resting his head in his hands, the envelope slipping from his grip onto the floor. He could see her clearly now, not as a memory or a fleeting regret, but as a truth he could no longer ignore. She had carried life, nurtured it, loved it, without him. 3 children, vibrant, living proof of a life he had abandoned and dismissed with callous pride. The enormity of his failure consumed him. He recalled the Christmas gala, the sharp words, the accusations, the public shaming he had tried to wield against her. The anger, the desire for dominance, the certainty of control. It had all crumbled when faced with truth. And that truth was unstoppable, undeniable, and unforgiving. Alex rose abruptly, pacing the room, his mind a cyclone of denial and realization. He remembered Asher's crescent-shaped scar, Reese's small, determined jaw, Finn's confident stare. The DNA results had only confirmed what he had glimpsed, what he had feared to acknowledge in the ballroom. These were his sons, his blood, his legacy, and he had missed every day of their lives. He staggered toward the window, staring out at the city that spread beneath him. All the lights, the wealth, the power, it all felt hollow now. For 2 years he had built an empire of wealth and influence, but it had no meaning compared to the life he had forsaken. No contract, no acquisition, no title could replace what he had ignored. The knowledge was unbearable. Alex sank to the floor, back against the cold glass. The office felt oppressively large, empty, echoing with the silence of missed moments. He could almost hear the laughter of his children, faint and distant, a haunting echo of the life he had lost. The tears came then, sudden and unrelenting. He wept violently, like a man drowning, like a man finally realizing that pride had no currency against truth, that arrogance could not shield him from consequence. Memories surfaced with painful clarity. Her gentle composure, the way she had carried herself even as he tore at her dignity. The quiet strength that had been invisible to him until it was undeniable. Every insult, every slight, every cruel word he had spoken ricocheted inside him now, amplified by shame. He realized with crushing weight that she had been right all along. The only barrenness in their past was not hers, it was his heart. Alex's eyes fell on a discarded wedding photograph on his desk. The image, faded slightly from time, captured a moment he had ignored. A hopeful smile on her face, eyes bright with expectation, untainted by the years to come. For a moment he simply stared, numb. Regret, grief, and disbelief merged into one relentless wave. He could almost hear the silent accusation in her gaze, piercing through him. He realized then that no amount of wealth could undo this. No apologies, no reconciliation, no attempt at reclaiming control could erase the lost time, the moments he had forfeited. And yet, he knew he had to try. He had to face her, had to confront what he had missed, and somehow reclaim a place. Not for himself, but for the children whose lives he had ignored, whose presence he had denied. Alex rose slowly, trembling, exhausted, every step weighted by guilt. He knew what he had to do. He could not undo the past. He could not erase 2 years of absence, of cruelty, of ignorance. But he could attempt to make amends. He could attempt to be a father, even if the road ahead would be fraught with resistance, with anger, with suspicion. For the first time, the billionaire, the man who had once thought himself untouchable, understood humility. He understood the cost of arrogance. He understood that love, responsibility, and truth were more valuable than any empire, any fortune, any title. And he also understood that proving himself would be the hardest challenge of his life. He picked up the envelope one last time, staring at the numbers. The words, the undeniable proof of his paternity. The weight of it pressed on him like a leaden mantle, suffocating yet clarifying. He realized that facing Layla, confronting the truth, asking for forgiveness, everything would have to start here. No shortcuts, no power moves, only honesty, only vulnerability, only the possibility of redemption. Alex sank back into his chair, exhausted in body and spirit. The tears continued, unrelenting, as he allowed himself to feel every moment he had denied. And for the first time he wondered if Layla would ever allow him near the children he had so carelessly abandoned. Alex clutched the DNA results in his trembling hands. Outside, the city continued in its normal rhythm, unaware of the storm in his heart. He knew one thing with absolute certainty. Tomorrow, he would have to face Layla. And when he did, everything, the pride, the arrogance, the empire he had built, would mean nothing against the truth he had ignored for 2 years. The snow had begun to fall softly outside, delicate flakes drifting past the windows of Layla's modest home. Inside, the warmth of the fireplace contrasted sharply with the storm raging in Alex's chest. The DNA results had already shattered him, had already reduced the billionaire to a trembling, guilt-stricken man. Yet this moment, was unlike any other he had ever faced. There would be no power, no arrogance, no wealth to shield him here. Only truth, only the weight of his mistakes and the possibility of forgiveness that had never before seemed necessary. He stood on the porch for a long moment, his hand resting lightly on the doorframe, staring down at the home that Layla had made into a sanctuary, a place of love, warmth, and life. 3 small figures ran across the yard, their laughter mingling. They will test you, life will test you, I will test you, and I will not allow them or me to be hurt again. Alex swallowed hard. I understand, he whispered, every word weighted with humility and determination. I will earn it. I will not fail them again. The children stepped forward cautiously, their small hands reaching tentatively toward him. Asher touched Alex's knee first, a small, tentative gesture. Reese followed, holding tightly onto Layla's hand, but peeking curiously. Finn reached out, his fingers brushing Alex's, and the connection, the recognition, the bond, was instantaneous and undeniable. Alex felt something he had never experienced in his life, pure, unfiltered responsibility. A love that demanded humility, attention, and devotion. A weight that was no longer burdensome but sacred. And in that instant he knew he would never again take it for granted. Layla's gaze softened slightly, a subtle acknowledgement that this moment, this fragile, tentative reunion, was the beginning of something new. Not perfect, not without scars, but real, alive, and undeniable. The room seemed to exhale collectively, the tension, the fear, the lingering anger dissolving slowly into a tentative hope. Alex remained on his knees, head bowed, tears falling freely, fully vulnerable for the first time in years. And in that vulnerability, there was power, the power of truth, accountability, and love finally recognized. As the 3 boys clung closer to their mother and Alex, the distance that had existed for years began to shrink, replaced by cautious trust. Alex whispered apologies repeatedly, promises he would keep etched into every syllable. And though the road ahead would be long, filled with tests, trials, and the rebuilding of bonds, for the first time, it felt possible. Alex looked at Layla, then at the children, and allowed himself to hope. Not blind hope, not naive hope, but hope forged in truth, humility, and the undeniable force of life he had created and nearly lost. Outside, snow continued to fall, silent and persistent, covering the world in a blanket of white. Inside, a man who had once ruled empires now knelt in quiet reverence before the family he had nearly destroyed. The journey of forgiveness, love, and redemption had begun, fragile and tentative, but real. And for the first time, Alex understood. He had been barren, not her. His heart, empty for years, was finally ready to grow.